The Electoral Commission of South Africa has released its first quarterly report in line with the provisions of the Political Party Funding Act. In terms of the Act, political parties are required to disclose all donations above 100,000 rand, and there is a cap of 15 million of which they can receive donations. The IEC Vice Chairperson, Janet Love, joins me tonight. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight, Ms. Love. Firstly, let's talk about the number of political parties that are represented in this country and are well likely to contest the local government elections versus the number of those who have declared donations.
Well, there are just over 500 registered political parties. In terms of the number of political parties that will contest our upcoming elections, local government elections, that's not yet clear. But we have, of the just over 500 political parties, we have 15 represented political parties and a number of political parties that are not yet holding any seats in the different spheres of government. So of all of the parties, we have 3 political parties who received donations directly. We have 3 political parties who have received those donations such that they had to report. And as you indicated in your introduction, that report only needs to be lodged once the amount exceeds 100,000 rand.
So what are we to read out of this data that is coming out of the IEC? Does it mean that political parties are currently not being funded by private donors, at least not to the tune of about 100,000 rand?
Look, I think there are a number of things that can be read into it. The first thing which is really important to say is that this is a new piece of legislation. I think everybody is having to orientate themselves and get used to it. That's not just the political parties, but it's also the donors. I think the second thing is that we, in a situation where just at the sort of broad level of the economic climate, things are pretty tough. Having said that, I do believe that this the legislation has had an impact on the funding that is given to political parties, because I think that it's something that the transparency with which that is given is something that is not is new, and there are some ambiguities that different donors may have, partly because of the fact that this is a new system. So that's on the one side, I think, what can be read, and obviously it is of concern because we do believe that political parties do need to be funded, because that goes to the heart of the competitive and democratic nature of our political system, to have political parties that are vibrant, contesting, and able to reach out to the electorate. But I think the other thing that it indicates is this is the first quarter. And even if political parties have received some smaller donations, these might not have aggregated to being the 100,000 threshold, which requires that report either from a donor or, in the case of the political parties, from the political parties. So it's early days, it's the first quarter, it's something, as I say, that is new. But we do need to recognize that there are concerns, and there has been no change in the allocation that is made to represented political parties, from the fiscus. So this is clearly going to have an impact on what all political parties, but in particular, relatively speaking, the represented political parties, feel themselves able to do.
That's the assumption that we would naturally make, that, you know, if there is a limited pool of places where these political parties can access money, then it means, of course, a lot of the work that they do, even the scale of campaigns that they hold, could be quite curtailed. But if we find that to not be the case, especially with this current election cycle, is there a way of the IEC to reconcile what a party has declared versus what we see and what the estimated costs of the campaigns of the various parties are likely to be, and reconcile that gap?
So I think there are three things that maybe we should take note of. The first is that the legislation provides for a dual reporting system. So the responsibility is as much on the political parties as it is on the donors. And I think that's really important, because what the people in the legislature have wanted to do is to set the tone of a transparent environment, so we have the kind of certainty. So the first thing I would say is that it's important for us to ensure that there is that kind of equity. The second thing is that the political parties have an obligation in terms of the legislation to appoint an auditor. And so, again, we do need to look to the auditing profession to be really professional in its dealing with this task, to be able to audit the books of political parties to ensure that the funds that have come into those political parties are indeed reconciling with the documentation that will be submitted on an annual basis by the political parties. And then the third thing is all the walks of civil society and including, investigative journalists who may want to pay and have now some of the tools with which to understand what is officially the record, and can then look into this question, raise concerns and so on with us, so that we can then pursue some of those issues if the information that is presented to us warrants that.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. The IEC Vice Chairperson, Janet Love.